Welcome everyone again to another episode of Community Conversations by the Center for Black Equity. It's been a while since we've been on here, right, Tony? It's been a little minute.
Yes, it has.
It's been a little minute. Glad to be back. So everyone, my name is Kenya Hutton, also known as Kenya Garcon. I use he, him pronouns, and I serve as the Deputy Director of the Center for Black Equity. And my co-host, wrong side, you're over there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Toni Marie Preston, and I am the Program Coordinator here at Center for Black Equity. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you. So many things are happening right now, right? UK got a new prime minister. Who knew? Rest in peace, Leslie Jordan. Like, so many things has happened within the past couple of days, right? But today we are coming together to talk about something very important, right? We're going to talk about domestic intimate partner violence. This is, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we thought it was a good idea for us to just have this conversation and bring in some experts to really talk about what it is and what it means. Before we dive in, I pulled some information. Everyone knows I'm a nerd. This is what I do, right? And I was surprised. And Tony, tell me if you knew some of these things. First of all, I want to start off with the difference between intimate partner violence and domestic violence, because those terms are kind of used interchangeably sometimes. And I'm trying to see which definition did I like the best. I liked this one the best, where it actually said the difference while may appear to be the same thing and certainly have much overlap, domestic violence and intimate partner violence are two different terms with different meanings. Domestic violence is violence that takes place within a household and can be between two people within that household. Domestic violence can occur between a parent and child, siblings, or even roommates. Intimate partner violence can only occur between romantic partners who may or may not be living together in the same household. Intimate partner violence may also be referred to as intimate partner domestic violence. Did you know that about the difference between the two?
I did, yes.
Of course you did. You're so smart. Something I did also find out when I was doing some research for today as well. First, I want to talk about the 4 of the ways these can show up, right? Show up as physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, psychological aggression, financial, and the list goes on and on and on and on. But what I also found interesting was about 41%, came from the CDC, about 41% of women and 26% of men experience contact, sexual violence, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner, and reported an intimate partner violence related impact during their lifetime, injury, post-traumatic stress disorder, etc. Over 61 million women and 53 men have experienced psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Did you know those numbers?
Now that's a lot.
That's a lot, ain't it? Ain't it? And then I have my notes. When we talked about the transgender community, I looked into a survey that was done back in 2015, and they're actually doing another one right now. Nearly half, 47% of the people that participated in that study were sexually assaulted at some point in their lifetime, and 1 in 10 were sexually assaulted within the past year of this survey, right? In communities of color, of course, the numbers are higher, right? And we came up with 53% of Black respondents were sexually assaulted in their lifetime, and 13% were sexually assaulted within the last year. There's some other stark numbers, right? So, this is why we wanted to have the conversation today. And we just thought it was important just to create a space for folks to share their stories and also to learn about resources that may be available to them. So what I am going to do is I'm going to hand over, I was going to say the mic, but we're not on stage. Hand it over to Latoya Davenport from the U.S. State's Attorney's Office of the District of Columbia to bring on greetings and talk a little bit more about what brought us here together. Latoya?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Latoya Davenport. I am the 3rd District Community Outreach Specialist with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I have my community prosecutor, Anita LaRue, on the call as well. In recognition of Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we just wanted to bring awareness to a community that we have not done a lot of work with, which is the LGBTQ youth. And that's why we are here today. The U.S. Attorney's Office tried to take a more proactive approach to prosecution. So therefore, we are in the community doing a variety of programming from domestic violence, teen dating violence, bullying, financial crimes against seniors, just to name a few. And I would like to thank everyone for participating as well as joining us today.
Anything from you, Anita LaRue?
No, just thank you. Thanks for partnering with us. And I just want to say, so I am like she said, the community prosecutor, and I'm the community prosecutor for both the 3rd District and the 7th District here in the District of Columbia. Look forward to working with you on this project and many other projects.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for reaching out to us because, you know, this is an important conversation. And we definitely want to also highlight, you know, intimate partner violence, domestic violence within the LGBTQ community. So I was very excited to do that. For that you guys reached out. Let's start having this conversation. And if anyone missed it, check out on the Center for Black Equity's YouTube the discussion we had about financial crimes against seniors. It was actually interesting because it spanned beyond just seniors, right? So without further ado, our first speaker today is right from here from Washington, D.C. It's Officer Desiree Walker from the Metropolitan Police Department's Special Liaison Unit.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us. As Kenya mentioned, I'm with the Metropolitan Police Department Special Liaison Branch, specifically the LGBT Liaison Unit, and my pronouns are she and her.
Awesome, thank you. So actually, why am I gonna do it that way? I'm gonna do, boom, I'm gonna put some, you know, y'all can see my face too when we talk to you. So very briefly, I mentioned about, you know, domestic violence around, you know, women, men, and trans, right? And the numbers that came up was kind of high, right? We always hear about domestic violence around with cisgendered women. Why do you think men, and I can't say why do you think, just what you do, right? So you know, right? Why is it that men don't report as often?
Well, there's many different reasons. Honestly, most of society, you know, a lot of our programming has been that women are, cisgender women are the victims of domestic violence. And so a lot of outreach that has traditionally been done has been towards cisgender. But as someone who talks to men often, talks to the trans community, you know, we are well aware that it is not an isolated incident. Domestic violence and intimate partner violence goes across the board. And unfortunately, we have seen it. We have taken reports for stalking. We have taken reports for a number of things that we want to make sure all victims get the help that they need. And so one of the biggest things is making sure people understand that there should not be any shame. There should not be any embarrassment. You know, there are a lot of survivors who need assistance, and we have resources for that. And so we want to make sure that at the end of the day, anyone who has been a victim is, you know, their rights are going to be protected, and we're going to be there to support them and help them through the process.
Awesome. Thank you. That's Interesting. Well, I can't even say interesting because you touched on something about the stigma. Why do you think that there's so much stigma around men and the trans community with reporting sexual assault or just domestic violence in period? I'm sorry.
Right. I mean, I can't speak to how people are feeling, right? Because that's their feelings.
Right.
But what I speak to from a law enforcement perspective is that, at the end of the day, in general, it's hard to, as a victim, basically acknowledge that you've been a victim, right? It's very jarring. I've had family members who have gone through things, and the process of it all it's scary, right? Like, we have to acknowledge that. Like, calling the police for help or asking for help is sometimes not the easiest thing to do. And especially if you've been re-victimized, right? So, like, we've had this conversation, and that's the part where we want to break down those barriers to say, we are here to help. And so with that is constant outreach, constant communication. We're here, for people who are familiar with our unit, we've been around for over 20 years. We don't just show up when things are bad. We want to show up when things are good, right? Because we're here for everyone. And so making sure people are comfortable to know that if something does happen to them or a loved one, that there are resources here to help them get through that process.
Awesome. Thank you. Tony, do you have anything you'd like to ask Officer Walker? I'll talk to Officer Walker all day long.
We appreciate it.
No, yeah, I think you asked the question that I would ask, as a, Black trans woman. I think, like you said, oftentimes, intimate partner violence and domestic violence isn't talked about, within the community. And I think it's definitely very important to, start the conversation. So I'm glad, tonight we're starting the conversation.
Yeah.
And we thank you all for having us. I mean, I'll say, as a Black lesbian woman, been a part of the community for a long period of time. It's one of those things that, you're right, it's not talked about. Like, no one wants to say, like, oh my God, that person is involved with something that, I'm saying, is detrimental to someone and the community, right? Because that's the part that we have to speak up about and protect people and protect one another.
I'm furthering some more information. I got more data for you, and this actually ties in perfectly to Officer Walker. We're talking about youth, right? About 16 million women and 11 million men who reported experiencing contact sexual violence, physical violence, or stalking by intimate partner in their lifetime said that they first experienced these forms of violence before the age of 18. Right? And that's crazy, right? I know it happens, it's crazy to me. What can or how can, and I know you're only going to speak from, MPD's perspective, right, here in DC, but what are some ways and steps that someone that wants to report can? Like, can you walk us through the process?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up that information, because when we speak about youth, DC is kind of a progressive place in the sense that we have a school resource division. So we have officers who are actually in schools. But also, we've got the Officer Friendly program that I was raised in, here in DC. And these programs are very important because, like I said earlier, we don't want to just show up when there are bad things happening. We also want to be there when the good things are happening so people can build a rapport. In addition to understanding that it's not just the police that are there to help, but your counselors, your teachers, administrators. It's the old adage, it takes a village. And so if someone is experiencing any type of violence, intimate partner, domestic violence, anything of that nature, you want to reach out to not just the police for 911, but you want to reach out to those who are around you, right? So if you are a youth, you're, doing an internship, right? So back in the day, we had the Marion Barry Youth Program. We were working, who are you working with? And there are other leaders and programs and opportunities to say, hey, I need some help, right? And so I think somebody will touch on it earlier that, there are people who are mandated reporters, right? So if you come up to an officer and say, I need help, we're going to be there to help you. And we're going to find out whatever is going on and figure out how to get you to safety. but where it's not just the police, it's other parts of the community, which I know other people talk about later. And so it's just very important for the youth to know that they're not here by themselves. I know a lot of times they can feel like that, but we've all been youth ourselves. And so that's where it's very important to have that connectivity, not just in an emergency, but even in the downtimes.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have a question here. I was trying to think about how to form it, but I'm just going to ask it just the way it was written. How could one start a general topic of policing with all genders in their community with a police department?
So that's a great question. All of our police departments have community meetings. They have community conversations. We've had coffee with a cop, and other great community outreach programs. So if someone is interested, there's a number of ways you can do it. One, you can reach out to the police department, to our public information office. You can go to your local district. We have 7 districts in the District of Columbia, and actually walk in and say, I would like to have a community conversation. We have community outreach personnel in all of those districts, as well as downtown. And then even some of our specialized units. So really it's up to the person who wants to get the conversation started. We're going to be there to help and lend the resources needed. So let us know, we'll put it together.
Awesome, thank you, thank you. We're streaming on a couple different platforms, so I'm gonna ask the voice from behind the screen. Do we have any questions out in the and from any one of our platforms?
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet. Okay. Thank you, The Voice. Calling him The Voice, that is Murtada. He's another team member here at the Center for Black Equity. All right. Officer Walker, I know you have a busy evening today. I'm actually going to come see you in a little bit. If you can hang around, if any more questions pop up, I would love to direct them to you. But if you're not on and someone does have a question later on, are you able to just say a way so someone can get in contact with you?
Absolutely. So as I said, I'm out of the special liaison branch, and let me give you our email address. It is slb.adminbox@dc.gov. Once again, slb.adminbox@dc.gov. Field any questions, conversations, or any way that we can help, please feel free to email us, and we do our best to get you the information.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and have a good time. I'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you for having us.
All right, no problem. Anytime. Take care. Well, I muted myself. All right. Tony, thoughts? What are your thoughts on what Officer Walker shared with us?
So many thoughts. I think that Officer Walker shared a lot of great information with us, especially as when it comes to like she said, those downtimes and just that community connectivity. I think that's kind of like what is resonating with me. That sense of community and how important it is to have community and be in community when it comes to talking about intimate partner violence and domestic violence.
Absolutely, absolutely. If anyone is watching us online, share the live. We want as much people to see this as possible. We want to get as much questions from people as possible. We have people watching us from all different angles. So wherever you drop a question, someone's going to be able to funnel a question into us to get it answered. And of course, subscribe. Got to do that, that whole hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Because we do have more of these conversations that's going to be coming up. All right. So the next guest that we have this evening is from DC Safe Crisis Response, is the DC Safe Crisis Response Team Manager, Rachel Ingley. Rachel, are you there? Oh, there you are.
I am. Hello. Thanks for having me here. Yes, I am Rachel Ingley, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am the Crisis Response Team Manager at DC Safe. Essentially, we are a domestic violence nonprofit organization here in Washington, D.C. And we primarily focus on intimate partner violence, but we get referrals and assist people just under the whole umbrella of domestic violence. Just depends on what's going on. So I appreciate you having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming. Was my definition of the difference between intimate partner and domestic violence right? Did I pull the right thing?
Yes. Sometimes, a lot of times it's really based on law almost. So what's qualified and what doesn't. But yes, in general, you have the domestic violence branch. There's intimate partner, whether you have child in common, whether you've dated currently or previously, divorced, married. That's the intimate aspect. And then there's non-intimate partner, which could be a blood relative, related by marriage, a roommate. Now, something along the lines of a neighbor, that's not domestic violence. And so you did hit the nail on the head.
Because I think folks need to understand that. I know because we always hear domestic violence, we never hear intimate partner violence. And then when we get into space like this and we say it, people are like, well, what's that? Right. All right. I believe you have a presentation, right?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. I am going to stop running my mouth and I'm gonna let you go ahead and take over.
Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and share this. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So I'm just here to talk about very briefly what is domestic violence and intimate partner violence, and then to talk about a safety and an exit plan. So domestic violence is just that, it's abuse. But abuse can be very difficult to spot, whether it's in your own relationship or somebody else's. And there's lots of different behaviors that can lead up to it. And these are what we call red flag behaviors. Okay, so things such as isolation, being controlling behavior, very easily or violently jealous, and these can look like they're behaviors out of love. So if, for example, isolation can be, I don't want you to go hang out with your friends at the bar tonight. I don't want you to go to the football game at school tonight. I want you to spend time with me. And at first, it can just look like out of love and wanting to spend time together. And over time, it overtakes the relationship and can become very controlling. Minimizing, somebody who has abusive behavior can minimize their behavior, make it seem like it's not a big deal. Being very manipulative, making you feel bad. Making, if I wanted to go hang out with my friends and, then making me feel bad about wanting to go do that. Or making you just feel crazy. There's this big word there's this, confusing word that always confuses me, and gaslighting. I hear it all the time and I always have to Google it every time I hear the word. But it's shifting events, making you think, wait, am I remembering this right? Switching blame. I put that hole in the wall because you made me do it, because you made me mad by saying hello to that person across the street. It's just little things that build up. So we have something called the cycle of violence. And if you think about it, it is the honeymoon phase. Everything is charming, and you're giving each other flowers, and so you get the butterflies in your stomach when you're ready to see the person. And over time, things start to build up and get tense. Maybe some arguments here and there, and those arguments increase, whether that be in how frequent they are or how severe they are. Abuse doesn't have to be physical. It can be, but this tension is when you are worried. You might be worried that you're going to make your partner mad. And this doesn't have to be intimate partner violence. I'm presenting this from that standpoint. So you have that tension, and then it builds up, and then there's the explosion. It's like a volcano. You have all this buildup of pressure, and then it explodes. And that can be whether you have a blowout fight and, one of you has the other leave the house for the day, or it could be that there's a physical assault or the door gets kicked off the hinges or something. That's when there's the big blowout. And then they come around back to the honeymoon phase with, I'm so sorry, I won't ever do that again. I didn't mean it. Please come back, things like that. And that makes it very hard to leave and get out. And so we see that go kind of round and round. It is a cycle. Kenya, you'd mentioned earlier, you brought up something really good, was sexual abuse and sexual assault. And it's actually one of the primary forms of abuse. It's rare that a stranger is going to pull you off the street into the woods and sexually assault you. Majority of the time, it's going to be an intimate partner or somebody you know. So it can be physical, emotional, psychological, sexual. There's all kinds, and economic, financial. Maybe you're not allowed to have a job, so you can't bring in money, and you have to depend on your partner for the money. Maybe you do have a job, but your partner takes the money or keeps track of it. I've worked with several people who made money, and their partner took the paychecks every time and then gave them an allowance. I once worked with someone who had a $20 allowance a month, and she had to present her receipts to her wife to prove that it was being used the way she said. So financial abuse is very real. So when we're looking at an exit plan, to be upfront, leaving is the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship. And this is because if you look back to that power and control wheel, it's the loss of all of that. And so it's really important, if you can, to have a plan in place. I understand, we get that there are going to be times where it is life or death if you don't leave right now. And you can still have an exit strategy if you feel like this argument is getting to be too much, trying to place yourself near an exit. But if you're able to plan ahead, here are these are some tips, I'd say. Okay, if you can, have a bag packed. If you can keep it maybe in a car, if you work or go to school, in your locker, at your office, somewhere that it's not going to be found by the person you don't want to find it. And it's important to have things, some clothes, some hygiene, money if you can. If you can get a hold of a spare phone, like a burner phone, you don't need to have a phone plan to call 911. And I know we don't always want to call 911, and you don't have to. You don't have to call 911 to report domestic violence or intimate partner violence, and that's okay. There's still a lot of other resources to contact. But in the event of an emergency, sometimes having a spare phone for that purpose, or with important phone numbers for people that you trust, can be good to have in that bag. Same with important documents, your ID, your birth certificate, your social security card if you have one. Really important to have things like that. If you don't have a spare phone, writing down addresses and phone numbers of places and people that are trusted and important to you to have on hand. Let's say you're married, or you're not married, but you share a bank account. If you can, having a separate bank account so that money isn't trapped, you can take some money out. And sometimes these just aren't possible, but these are definitely suggested. Creating a new email. Maybe it's an email address that you only access when you're at school or when you're at the library, so that there's no trace of it on your computer at home or on your cell phone. Having a place to go is probably one of the ones that I really stress, because I see a lot that someone will leave and go out of state and don't have a plan, don't have anywhere to go, don't know anybody, and then are stuck. And so really doing your research to find shelters in the area that you plan to go, maybe contacting them ahead of time if you can. There's organizations everywhere that are like hiding in plain sight almost. You wouldn't know they're there. And doing your research is important. If you have family, a friend, or somebody, a trusted person that you could stay with, that's a really great plan. If it's possible that you could stay with somebody that your partner doesn't know, or whoever you're fleeing doesn't know where that location is, that's great too. But making sure that you have some kind of plan on where you can go or some kind of shelter is probably one of the most important aspects. And, you know, there may be, let's say you have somewhere to go. Let's say you're going to fly to Texas and you're going to go stay with your aunt and uncle, but you can't get there. They can't afford to send you there. You can't get there yourself. There's lots of resources, including DC Safe where we are, and including crime victims compensation here in Washington, DC, that can assist with relocation. Whether that means getting a plane ticket or a bus ticket or paying for movers in a U-Haul truck. There are options out there to help bridge that gap. And the most important is tell somebody you trust that you're leaving. Okay, and that can be anybody. That could be, you know, your pastor if you go to church. It could be somebody at the rec center that you frequent. It could be a teacher, a friend, you know, a family member, anybody. If we are, and it's important because if you say this is the plan and I'm going to show up here and then you don't show up, at least people know where to look. It's the same concept as if I call my mom to say, hey, I'll be home at 10 o'clock. I'm working late, and then I don't show up and it's midnight. She knows how I get home. She can go look for me. It's the same concept. So there are resources that are 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365. Okay, DC Safe, we are one of them. We have a hotline that you can call anytime, day or night. It is important to recognize, though, that if you are, let's say, a teenager and you experience this, okay, it's very common to experience this as a teen, which can make it even harder to get out of sometimes. If you have a trusted person, maybe at your church, or maybe a family friend, or somebody at the rec center, or somewhere you frequent, it's important to know that, like Desiree said earlier, there are mandated reporters. We're mandated reporters. Teachers are mandated reporters, which means if we are told anything directly about child abuse or neglect, wanting to harm yourself or wanting to harm somebody else, we have to report that, whether that's to the police, to a mental health provider, or to Child and Family Services. So if that's a concern somewhere, there are still other options of reporting that does not require getting other parties involved, okay? So here on the screen, it's our website and our phone number. We also have the DC Victim Hotline. You can call or text them. DC Shelter Hotline, they're a really good one to have. Their number and their website's there. And then the National Domestic Violence Hotline is great because you can call from anywhere in the country and they will route you to resources in your region where you are. And so they're a really good resource as well. And just a kind of a quick additional thing, if you're on these websites and you're at home and you're doing it and the person that you may be considering leaving comes in, a lot of these websites have a little button that you can click and it changes the screen and makes it look like you're on a different website. Like maybe you're online ordering pizza or, you know, shopping on Amazon or something. And so that's another kind of safety thing that there's in place. That is the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That was a lot of information. a lot of good information, right? It was a lot of good information there. I'm just getting our screens back on. So a couple things you said, and it just like made me sit. I had to turn off my camera because I was like reminiscing about, situations that I've seen and been around, and some other people that have actually reached out to me as a place they need to get away. They came to me. So I was over here just like reflecting and thinking and seeing where they place. It was when you talked about the controlling and the cycle and having an exit plan. I think that's very, very, very important. And sometimes folks don't have the resources to have that exit plan, but I mean, when you can, is you would like to have, but sometimes, like you said, you just have to go. You just have to get out and go, right? And that's real. And I want to like speak to that and make sure that we acknowledge that, like, sometimes that's what happens. Tony, you have any questions?
Not right now.
Not right now. Okay. I have a question for you. It's about, is it possible for an abuser to change?
Sure. That's going to depend on them. You can't change your abuser. I can't, if whoever I'm dating, if they're abusive, I can't change that. Sometimes that's why we stay.
Right.
There is love there is caring, and we want to help them, we want to change them, and they'll say they're going to change, and then we find ourselves still in that cycle. But they can if they want to, and there are resources to do that. There are support groups for people with abusive behaviors. There are, a lot of times they're mandated by court. So a lot of times maybe their behavior stems from because they were abused as kids.
Yeah.
Or from drug and alcohol abuse and things like that. The possibility to change is there.
Yeah.
But they have to do that.
They have to want to do it, right?
Yes, exactly. And I meant to note earlier, generally we say it takes 7 to 11 touches of kindness before somebody can fully leave an abusive relationship. And so just taking a step forward is calling a hotline just to answer some questions, to get some information. Right. Okay, that's one of those steps. And so it's okay to backtrack and decide, I'm not ready yet. Right. And there's no judgment.
Right. That's okay to say I'm not ready yet also, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. No. That was some great information that you shared with us. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. You're gonna hang out with us for a little bit in case any other questions come in? All right. Voice from beyond. Is there any questions out in the universe for us?
There is a comment within the Capitol Ballroom Council. Just sent it over you. Beyond that, no questions.
Okay. Oh, just a comment?
Yes.
Do you want to share what the comment is?
What's it called?
You want to text me?
Ron, I did text it.
You texted to me?
Yes, I did.
We gotta screen these things.
Said also violence resistance is another thing that isn't talked about a lot. In that case, the person that appears to be the aggressor is actually the victim. Manipulator get a kick out of those emotional reactions while enjoying the pity of others. Pity is power in their mind.
You agree? What do you think about that, Rachel?
I would agree. And I think that's where a lot of times when people maybe are afraid to call 911, let's say strangulation is the #1 form of physical violence in an abusive relationship. A lot of times marks don't show. And if they do, it takes a while. Yeah, What's really normal is if you're being strangled, you're going to fight. And you're gonna do what you can. And usually that's towards somebody's face. And so immediately it may look like you're the perpetrator because you scratched the other person.
Right.
And that other person may often make it seem that way.
Yeah.
May act like the victim themselves. And I've seen that too. Call and calls our hotline and saying that they're the victims and they experience this. We typically know the opposite, but that's very, very common. And that's also part of, I think, the hesitation for reporting is that miscommunication and that falling through the crack.
Right, right. Like abuse can look so many different ways, right? It's not one way. It's not like a cookie cutter. Okay, this is what category it falls into. It goes up and down the spectrum. Um, um, so before we move on to the next speaker, could you repeat the 11 acts of kindness that you said? You mentioned something about 11 acts of kindness.
So the rule of thumb is what I've always been taught is it takes 7 to 11. So, you know, like I love the Slurpees. It's 7-11, easy to remember. It takes 7-11 touches of kindness before someone successfully leaves an abusive relationship. And that just means it's going to take multiple attempts to do that before you leave for good. And that's where we're, you know, that's the normalizing that's okay.
Right. Oh, thank you. So and again, my brain is just going because I'm thinking about folks that romanticize that whole, oh, don't go with your friends thing. Like it's cute until it leads to something. Let me stop because Rachel and I are going to sit here and talk like for an hour. Thank you so much for sharing the presentation. Hang out for a little bit if you can. Wow, I'm reading comments. Wow, I like that figure fact. Thank you for sharing. Always great to give some positive vibes when you never know. And other people saying thank you. Thank you for the message. All right. So, Tony, how you doing over there?
Doing good.
Doing good. All right. You're hanging in there. For those of you who don't know, Tony over in the Midwest. She's our Chicago correspondent. So next up we have Jashana, the last poet Roper. And Shoshana is going to come and just share their story, right? Talk about some things.
Yes.
Right? So I'm gonna go ahead and bring. Oh, Shoshana, you just went away. I'm using Zoom, so you know when one person moves, the whole screen.
Yes.
Like, all right, here we go. Hey, Jashana.
Hey. Hey guys, so like he said, I am Jashana, the last poet. I am the CEO of Tune In Space Out Media. That's my spaceman. And I'm also a musical recording artist. If you see me looking up, I have my notes just so I make sure that I cover everything. It's been really impactful just listening to, I guess, the right way to kind of get out of a situation that I've been in. And I think that telling my story is really important because I faced a lot of negativity for telling my story. I told it very publicly, immediately. It wasn't something I hid. And I encourage anybody going through anything not to hide their story. It's not drama. It's not negativity. It's real. And somebody can really be inspired to do better for themselves listening to your story. So a little bit just about me, and I'll just kind of lead right into my story. I have my bachelor's degree in child and adolescent clinical psychology. I'm currently about halfway through my master's in organizational industrial psychology at Purdue. And I started my business when I was with this partner. She actually paid for the LLC as like a birthday gift, funny enough. And it was a really interesting experience because I have known her since I was 17 years old. We were just friends. I'm gonna date myself a little bit, but we met on Tumblr. And we were really good friends. Like we talked all the time. And I'm from New York. She is in New York as well. She's from New York as well. So when I went to go visit, it was just like instant. It was like, I was like, this is the person that I want to be with. And until at that point, I had never felt like that. And so we stayed together for a while, maybe like 3 years on and off, but nothing was bad. Like when you're young, relationships are weird. Like, you're figuring out what you like, you're figuring out what you want to do, figuring out, what your dynamic is. So were we perfect? No. Did we break up a lot? Absolutely, yes. But was it abusive or manipulative? I would say no. Like reflecting back, no. But we did break up just because we did. And time passed, 5 years passed. So full grown adult now from, 22-ish to now I'm 28, but that was when I was maybe like 26, 27. And she apologized to me. Like, and it's funny because like I said, I'm not perfect. I don't ever claim to be perfect. As an 18-year-old, I would say that my issue was I thought the whole world revolved around me. And if you weren't with me, you didn't love me, right? And so I didn't really understand why she was apologizing, but I really at this point feel like she was apologizing for what had yet to happen. The side of her that I did not know yet was about to come into my life. And when she first came, I could tell that she was different. She had been with somebody for 5 years for that entire time in between who they did not have a healthy relationship. And I just wanted to see her do better. I wanted to see her grow. I wanted to see her happy. And so, you know, I helped her get a job. I do resumes, like my business, our basis is doing free resumes. So I did her resume, helped her with her cover letter, applying for jobs. We got her a job in an industry she loves. And I thought that everything was gonna be fine, but the first argument was weird. It was because I was afraid of a bug. Like the neighbors moved out. We had bugs coming from the neighbor's house. And I have a phobia of bugs, and she knows this. And she literally yelled at me for being afraid. And I couldn't really wrap my head around it at the time. I was like, what am I doing wrong? I'm like, I thought I was supposed to be able to be afraid in front of my partner. Like, maybe I'm not, maybe I should call somebody else when I'm afraid. I don't know. And so that was kind of the first thing. The second thing, I can't even tell you what it was, but it resulted in a broken door. Then there were several broken doors. Then there were several broken items. And it just kept escalating to a point where I was, without realizing it, creating an exit plan. Like at one point she had broken all of my studio equipment. So like I said, I'm a recording artist, and I spent a lot of money on my studio equipment, and I am self-taught. So I was in the middle of teaching myself how to produce, how to record. And one night she was just very drunk, very angry that I did not want to engage with a drunk person. And while I was sleeping, proceeded to trash my entire studio. And so the first part of my exit plan was saving my studio. I reordered everything and I packed it into a suitcase with 3 outfits. So that should tell you music up here, clothes down here for me personally. So I did that, and I kept that under the bed, and I kind of kicked her out into the living room. So all my stuff that I felt like, okay, if I have to go, this is what I have. And I was working from home at the time during the pandemic. So this lasted about a year, not long at all. And this is sort of towards the end of the story. And this is going to come up where we talk about like how it can look like you're the abuser when you are literally the one being abused. I was sleeping with headphones on because every night she'd be super drunk and very loud. So I would just I wear my headphones literally everywhere, and I just would sleep with them on, but they slipped off one night and the music was so loud. It's 2 a.m. And I was like, but I have it on my phone, like the little, like the Alexa, TV, whatever. So I turn it off. She turns back on. I turn it off. She turns on my speaker. Like I have like a small little Bluetooth speaker that sits out in the living room. I go out there. I'm like, yo, I have to go to work at 6 a.m. Like, this is not cool. And she's just very intoxicated. And the next thing I know, I'm getting hit. I don't want to be too graphic because I know it's young people, but I know I don't look like the type of person who's just going to let somebody hit them, but I really loved her. And I think that's the worst part about being in an abusive relationship is like it's been said, there really is love there. And my prototype of love does not involve hitting anybody that I care about. And if yours does, you should really talk to somebody. But at that point, it was like, okay, what can I do so that I don't have to get hit anymore? And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go. I start, getting my stuff together because everything is mine. She came into my home. Everything is mine. So I start taking whatever it is that I want. And as I'm taking things, she's literally pulling weapons on me while I'm calling 911. And I think the only thing that saved me was I was like, you're going to try and take my life on the phone with 911? Like, that's strange. So she leaves because I called the police at this point, which was not what I wanted to do. It's not something that I do regularly, but it had to happen because I was not safe. And at this time, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make this so that I can't come back, she can't come back, nobody's gonna come back. And I tore up the whole house. I was like, everything broken, TV broken, radio broken, everything but my stuff, and whatever she bought, which wasn't much, I trashed. And was that the right thing to do? Probably not. But this is what happens when you're in this heightened emotional state, this fight or flight response. Is like, how can I keep her away? If I have to come back to the house, will she want to come back to the house if it is trashed? And when the authorities arrived, I'm the aggressor, and I'm literally escorted out of my own home, like with them like kicking down the door. And after, when I explained what was going on, like the next day, everything was fine. I was with my mother, and I stayed with my mother until I moved into my new, nice, lovely apartment that I've been in for the last 3 years. But I think what my story really highlights is a couple of things. Number one, education doesn't save you. I am a very well-read person with a lot of experience in life. I'm a very talented creative, I think. And I still was not able to stop this when I should have stopped it the very first time. There should never be a second time or a third time or fourth time, because there might not be a fifth time, because you may not be alive. And I don't think that anybody should have to lose their life in order to get out of an abusive relationship. So that's my story. And yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. Wow. Just wow. Thank you so much for sharing the story. Tony, you have anything you want to start us off with?
I think I would start us off with a question. I think my biggest question is, what advice, would you give to, young LGBTQ plus youth who are, in intimate partner violence, relationship?
So I think one thing I realized in my advanced adulthood, well, not advanced, but adulthood, is that the patriarchal systems that create toxic relationships are not only present in heteronormative relationships. When you get into a relationship with somebody, especially if, like me, I'm very queer, I don't assign myself to any sort of dynamic predisposed in a relationship. So I think that I'm dating people who are like that. But the truth is, it is hard for some people to grow beyond the negative parts of the patriarchy and tap into true equity, true togetherness, true unconditional love. And the first time you see it, it's not your job to change them. As we said, you cannot. Don't think that it's going to get better or that it's a one-off. Just cut it. It's okay. Be that guy. That would be my advice. Be that guy. Cut it immediately. There's somebody around the corner who might be better, who might be the same, but just go see what they're doing. And if they're not good, keep it moving to the next person.
Yeah. Your story reminded me of my story. I was with a relationship before I moved to DC. I was in a relationship with someone, and he had went to a Christmas party, Thanksgiving party, I can't remember what it was. I went to go pick him up from work. Driving home on Sultan Parkway, he's just loud and going on and on, and I'm just driving. I'm like, okay, this fool he's carrying, whatever. So all I said to this guy is, you need to turn it down a little bit because you are yelling in my ear. He turns and says, I ain't gonna be quiet, and you ain't gonna do shit. I said the S word. You ain't gonna do bleep about it, right? And then while I'm driving on the parkway, shoves my head into the side, the thing where the seatbelt was. I don't know how I got to the little parking lot that I got, because last I remember I was just on the parkway. Next thing I remember, we're in a parking lot right behind my house of like a 7-Eleven, and we're fighting and we're tussling, and I'm like, Kenya, you gotta go. I get up, I hop in my car, right? He's standing there kicking, trying to smash my window open. I call the police. The police comes, puts me in handcuffs, and I'm like, bro, I called y'all, all right? But I'm taller, I'm darker, I'm a little bit more, whatever, than he was. And that really ruined my whole concept of relationships for a very, very, very long time, you know. But I shared that story just to say, like, now I'm engaged to a wonderful man. You know, we've been together 7 years. This man has never even raised his voice to me. Like, I don't even know what my fiance sounds like yelling, right? So even though I was in that situation and I was able to get out because they put me in handcuffs, caught my friend came, everything, you know, washed away. And I was able to like do some self-work, you know, with therapy. I was able to find happiness afterwards. So when you shared that story, you talked about the police and you being escorted by the police. I was just like, oh my God, that happened to me. Like, literally, you're the one calling the police for your safety, and you're getting taken out as the aggressor, and you really wasn't.
Yeah, and I'll be honest though, I preferred them escorting me out because I mean they wanted to come back and I didn't want to stay. The time prior to that, they kind of just said, oh, it's two chicks fighting, whatever, they'll be fine. And I was like, actually, we're not fighting. Like, I was like, actually, I literally couldn't tell you a time when I even thought about fighting back until after I was gone. Then I was like, I'm out now. I'm out. Like, but it never came to that. And I think that especially when I was like younger, because I feel like I was still very young-minded at the start of this situation, I think the problem that I have, and I think a lot of people have, my sister's going through it right now, is feeling like you can't be in love with somebody who's abusive. Like I'm smarter than being with somebody who's bad for me. I'm smarter than being in love with somebody who isn't the best for me. But the truth is, it's not that simple. It's just not that simple. Your body and brain do chemical things. There's a universal aspect. If you're spiritual, you don't know what somebody's in your life for. But when it's time for them to go and it's obvious, don't discredit your own intuition. Trust your intuition. Like that feeling of, oh, I gotta go, just go.
So, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Jashana. Do we have any questions out in the universe for the last poets?
Nope, nothing around here.
No question. All I'm seeing is hearts. Thank you for sharing your story. On my end, thank you, Jashana, for sharing your story. Hang around for a few minutes. If anyone wants to reach you, how can they get in contact with you?
I was about to say shameless plug. So if you need free resume services, or if you would like to donate to free resume services, $10 goes towards $50 worth of free services. You can go to our website at tisomedia.com. That's TISOMEDIA.com. And yeah, you can find my music on all streaming platforms, but maybe not.
Can you give me the website one more time?
Yep, it's TISOMEDIA.com, tisomedia.com.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much. All right. Tony, how you doing over? I gotta keep on checking. You know, me checking the news, checking on myself. You know that old thing. Like, how you doing? Okay. You good? All right. You good over there?
Yeah.
All right. We have one more speaker for you all this evening. Tracy Owusu. I think I said it right. Okay. She gave it a thumbs up. Tracy is the forensic interviewer for the victim advocate for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Ladies and gentlemen, Tracy.
Thank you so much, Kenya, and thank you everyone for being here. It's such an important topic. So as Jashana mentioned and Rachel, when the abuse does become after the police are involved, is when the U.S. Attorney's Office gets involved. And the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. is the prosecuting agency for local and federal crimes. So domestic violence can be both. When it does get to cyber and online things that can occur, it can get federal when it comes to, simple assaults, destruction of property and things like that is when it's local. So we're focusing on children, and children being the hidden victims in families where domestic violence occurs. So studies have estimated that 3.3 to 10 million children witness domestic violence each year. And
Think about
that's
the
stacked.
witnessing piece, right? I didn't even think, I missed that, witnessing it.
Yes, and that's where I think I'm gonna focus a little bit more on. Um, 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year, and 90% of those children are actually eyewitnesses to the violence. So we know how important it is, and we know that children grow up and can do amazing things when they receive love, they're in a stable environment. So I work with the Victim Witness Assistance Unit, and that unit within the U.S. Attorney's Office just empowers victims and witnesses of crimes to serve their needs with compassion and understanding. So the most important thing that we do is we're able to inform victims of their rights under the Crime Victims' Rights Act and provide information about the criminal justice process. We accompany victims to court. We help out with safety planning and witness security assessment. We work a lot with Rachel's organization, DC Safe, with making referrals. She also mentioned crime victims compensation programs. So we do offer assistance for people who are doing intakes and doing the application, as well as making referrals to community counseling, therapy, medical, legal resources. We have different sections within our unit, and one big important section is the witness security team. So they address any safety concerns made by the victim or witness and family. And it's very important to address those concerns first, because when people do come forward, it is scary. It is something where you need to either enhance some safety measures for individuals who choose to stay in their homes. We can also provide emergency temporary lodging for those who do need to leave, provide moving assistance. So there are witness security specialists who do hold intakes, and they will hear what's going on, and they'll find the best resource and the best support for that individual. We also have a central services team that handles victim notification systems. So if the victim is a child, a lot of the notification will go to the parent. If the parent is the person who is the one who is causing the harm, then whatever adult who is in custody of that child will be the person that is contacted regarding any notifications regarding court, um, and matters such as that. Our central services team also handles travel and lodging for victims and witnesses who don't live in DC and may have been here and a crime occurred. So we also make sure that privacy and confidentiality considerations for children are upheld. When it comes to court paperwork, a lot of times the child's initial will be put in as opposed to their full name. So as you know, I'm a forensic interviewer, and a forensic interview of a child is a recorded interview that is designed to elicit information from a child where there are concerns of possible abuse or a child has witnessed violence against another person. The interview was done in a non-leading manner by a trained professional that's developmentally appropriate and conducted in a safe and child-friendly environment. So we do have interviews that take place within the U.S. Attorney's Office, and a lot of times children do talk about the abuse that they've seen. Sometimes they have tried to intervene as well to help their parent or caregiver or loved one who is going through something. So it's really important for children to have an outlet, to have someone to talk to about what's going on. Our office also has specialized child advocates, and they assist child victims and witnesses throughout the court process. So from the investigation through trial and sentencing. A lot of times people don't feel comfortable having their loved ones right there with them. So if that's the case, we do have people in our office that are specialized and trained in working with children. We hold a monthly kids court program, and that is to educate young people on what it means to testify in court, teach children about everyone's roles in the courtroom and explain a child's role as a witness, talk to the child about their feelings or concerns of testifying, as well as the rules of the courtroom. Every witness needs preparation prior to testifying, but we know that a child who knows what to expect and is prepared for court can provide more credible testimony. And so if there is a point where there's a sentencing that takes place, whether someone is found guilty or whether they take a plea. The child has a right to provide a victim impact statement to the court to let the court know how the crime impacted them physically, emotionally, psychologically, or financially. They can also recommend what the sentence can be to the judge, but it's the opportunity to actually have their voice heard and let the court know. So a lot of times we have our advocates that will help children to provide victim impact statement to the court. We know that domestic violence poses serious threats to children's emotional, psychological, and physical well-being. And so we have an entire unit that's here that is there to support and there to assist. And it's when there's, after the police have been called and there's a criminal matter going on.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that information.
You're welcome.
So back on the screen here. There we go. All right. I have a question for you. If I'm a minor, do parents have to be involved in the court proceedings? I think you might have answered that, but I'm not sure. Do they have to be involved?
I answered some of it. So sometimes they do, because a lot of the notification is going to the parent. The attorneys or the advocates will be speaking to the parent as opposed to speaking to the child. But if you have an older youth, sometimes they have made it very clear that they can come to court or that they feel comfortable, being the one that the attorney speaks to. So it's about meeting everybody where they are and to address whatever concerns they may have. If they do have issues with their parents, knowing why. Making sure that, we try to understand as best as possible, because this process is not easy for adults, let alone a child. So we want to make sure that the child has all kinds of support and we can help through the criminal process. But once they leave court, we want to make sure the child has support once they leave as well. So it really depends on the situation, but there are certain instances where parents don't have to be involved.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And my next one is for any one of our service providers that's on the call right now. Can minors receive services from your agency without notifying their parents?
So from DC Safe standpoint, no, but also yes. So essentially, it doesn't have to be a parent, but it needs to be some kind of guardian. So I'll give an example of a case that I had a long time ago. It was a child who was beaten up by his dad pretty bad. And he went to grandma's house. And dad was known to carry firearms and had made some threats in regards to that. And so although we couldn't speak to the child directly, we were able to speak with grandma and get, placement or resources and counseling and whatever kind of support was needed set in place. Because in that situation, the parent was the perpetrator. And so, especially it gets pretty muddy, when it comes to minors, especially if you're right on that cusp of 18. And if, you're coming because you want help, we assist with filing protection orders and filling those forms out. And then when it comes to the court's rules on how old you can be to file and who you can and can't file against, it can really make it a case-by-case basis. But ultimately, there needs to be some kind of parent involved for us, or some kind of adult or guardian involved for us to be able to assist.
Thank you. I think I know Officer Walker's working. And Tracy, you already answered this. We talked about kids with your whole space, your whole session. I do have a question. This is for anybody. What are the modern tactics or protocols to help someone in need? Anybody can take this one.
You
Go
want me to
ahead,
take it, Rach?
Tracy.
Okay. I would just say making sure that they know they're supported, making sure that they know that they're believed. A lot of times people feel like they may hear something and it sounds so out of the ordinary, but there have been times where it's just like people are amazed and it actually happened. So making sure that someone feels comfortable enough to talk to you and know that they're supported. Like Rachel brought up, like having a plan. A lot of times there will be instances where people feel like they are able to leave and they're able to leave and they're not. So making sure having a plan, making sure you have someone that you can trust and confide in to know what's going on, and just believing. I would think that all of us can start by believing and being supportive and making sure that people feel like they're heard and they have somebody in their corner. Because a lot of times people don't leave because they don't feel like they have any help or they don't know where to turn. So, and I'm also going to put in the chat some therapy referrals. So anybody who needs that can have it, but it's important therapy and counseling too.
Absolutely, thank you. We make sure we share that on our social other platforms as well.
To piggyback off that too, I think that's something that has not been talked about enough since it was dropped is 988, which is the mental health number. Because if you are afraid to call the police, don't worry, the mental health people will show up and call them for you. And that's what I've been telling a lot of people, because as somebody in the mental health field myself, who has been on both sides of the system, I find I'm just more comfortable around somebody with a psych degree. I don't know.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, Kenya. Is it okay if I add?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I'm just sharing the information from Tracy everywhere. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I think it's also one of the things that I hear so much, and what I felt in my experience, because a lot of us end up in this field for a reason, is understanding that just because that everybody's situation is equally as important. I'm not going to say that I understand what Jayshana went through, because that's not my story. That's not my experience. I had my own, just as they're going to say that they can't fully understand mine. But that doesn't make it any less important or impactful or less dangerous. So, things can go from 0 to 60 in, immediately. And so what we find a lot is, let's say we get referrals from the police department. So basically MPD calls us when they go out to their family disturbance or some kind of domestic call. They give us that information so that we can follow up with the victim or the complainant, make sure that everything's okay, that they're safe, and then guide them through those next steps. I kind of called us the triage of domestic violence and crisis intervention. And a lot of what we find is, if we've had homicide victims or someone, who's been shot, and then we go through and we look at our database and the history, and all we have are family disturbances, arguments. But if you think about it, you called 911 for a reason, because you felt unsafe, regardless of what that reason was. And so I think it's important for people to know that you don't need to feel like your situation is less than someone's over here because maybe they got their nose broken and you didn't. Doesn't matter. You're muted.
Hey, you're on mute.
You would think after all these years, I would automatically like unmute myself, right? Like I host these shows. I'm always on somebody's webinar now. Thank you. I just wanted to come on and say thank you all for being with us today, sharing your stories, sharing, you know, tips and tricks and stories and just letting, you know, folks know, you know, that it's okay and there's a way out, especially as we go into the holiday season and we know a lot of things happen more around the holiday season. I think it's important that we had this conversation. I want to thank you all again for joining us. I'm reading comments. Thank you, very informative. Thank you. I'm reading on multiple devices. Thank you all again. Tony, you have any closing words you would like to leave with the people?
I just want to, thank, you all so much for joining us and, offering so much to the conversation, and definitely believe that, it's going to inspire and save lives. So thank you all so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you all again. All right. So visit our website, centerforblack.equity.org, for resources like this and other resources. Even if you just want to reach out to us to get in contact with one of the speakers, you just need someone to find out anything, right? You had a comment, you heard something here and you wanted to know, reach out to us, centerforblack.equity.org. My name is Kenya Hutton. You can email me there, k.hutton.org. No, that's not the email address. k.hutton@centerforblack.equity.org. Tony, what's your email address?
tm.preston@centerforblack.equity.org.
Yes, and we thank you all. Everyone have a safe night. Take care, everyone.